Welcome to Shop Talk Live, episode number 191. Today, Mike and Bob Van Dyke join me, and we discuss tool choices when tackling dados, concerns when swapping out plywood for solid wood, our all-time favorite techniques of all time for this week, and one listener's long-distance relationship with a 16-inch joiner. But first, I want to reach out to you, our audience, our listeners, our readers, our members. I want to know what everyone thought about our Learning Curve series, Turning for Furniture Makers, where Anissa and I learn how to turn for the first time from David Duyard, a Windsor chairmaker in Connecticut. And we go up there and he teaches us two newbies how to turn over the course of, I think it was 5 or 6 videos. And we walked out of there knowing how to turn. And I want to know if that helped you, the viewer, learn how to turn yourselves. And also, I want to know if you like this format where people are learning from a pro as opposed to the pro demonstrating. We're always trying to make our content better, and the only way that we're going to make it better is from hearing back from all of you. So head on over to the website. I'll have a link to a quick survey about the Learning Curve video. The other thing I want to tell you about is issue 276 should be in your mailboxes or on the newsstand soon. Anissa graces the cover, or her project, I should say, graces the cover. Her mid-century modular wall cabinet thing, the source of many smooth moves, as you would know if you've listened to any of these episodes lately. Also, Bob Van Dyke has a Fundamentals of Milling article, takes you through step-by-step, explains why you're doing everything that you're doing. He talks about it a little bit in this episode, which, as you can tell, was recorded a while ago. It was recorded before Fine Woodworking Live. Also in issue 276, Heide Martin builds a really cool table with a separate serving tray table, lots of cool techniques, cool turnings, some parquetry, and the best part is she dyes it with indigo, which is something I've never seen before. It's a strong issue. I know I say that every time, but we're really proud of the work that we do here. We think that if you're into woodworking, you can't get better information anywhere. So head on over to finewoodworking.com, sign up for an unlimited membership that gets you full access to the website and the issue in your mailbox, or subscribe to the magazine. It's a great way of supporting what we do here at the podcast. It's a great way of supporting fine woodworking. And it's why we do what we do, is to bring you, the listener, the member, the subscriber, great woodworking content that you can't get anywhere else. All right, enough of that. Here's episode number 191. So, Bob, you have something you wanted to talk about before we got going.
Yeah. So I've been involved with Old Sturbridge Village, and I was asked to be on the committee to help get the new cabinet shop for Old Sturbridge Village to make it a reality. They have not had a working cabinet shop since the early 80s, and it's kind of an important thing for OSV to have, especially, and what they realized with the work that Brock Job was doing on, and Christy Jackson did on Nathan Lombard and Oliver White, and Ebenezer Howard, I think, was the third guy. And these were like cabinet makers in Sturbridge and in Southbridge, and the work that they've done on with Nathan Lombard is an amazing work. Really kind of brought it home that this is a place that needs to have a cabinet shop.
So let's just start from a little bit before that. Old Sturbridge Village is in Massachusetts, Sturbridge, Massachusetts. Yeah. It's a living history museum, like you would. Like a similar to a place like Williamsburg,
like Colonial Williamsburg, yeah. And they have, they have all sorts of houses, and like historic Deerfield, they have houses. They have a great furniture collection, and they're open for, you can go and see candle making, and they have a sawmill, and
tin shop. And
tin knockoff.
The sawmill's incredible.
Yeah. And so it's really a cool place, and it's right nearby, you know.
Here, yeah.
So they're looking to build a cabinet shop, and Brock Job and Norm Abram are both very instrumental in the whole initiative, and the Caitlin Avery, who is the curator there, obviously is working very hard on it also, and so they're looking to raise $600,000 for the construction of the building and the shop, the benches and shop furniture and that sort of thing, and then 2 years worth of running it, and then the endowment that the OSV will have a capital campaign, and the endowment will be part of that to have it go and keep it going longer. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. Brock had asked me to be part of it last summer, and which was really, I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do, but anything I can. And so part of what we're doing here is going, hey, there's a cabinet shop that's going to be happening at OSV, and the projected opening is June of 2021, which would be the 75th anniversary of Sturbridge. And so that's when they're shooting to do it. And they, obviously every penny helps. So
send any proceeds to Shop Talk Live.
You can just
courtesy of Ben Stranham
and Mike Pekovich.
Well, or you could send it here, and then I'll tell you where to forward it to. Well, just go straight to OSV.
So as part of this, so there is a fundraising campaign happening.
Yeah.
And I assume by the time we get this posted, you'll have a link or something that I can post on the show notes to direct people towards.
We could do that.
Towards something like that.
Yeah.
And but what else is happening? You as part of SAPFM, Society of American Period Furniture Makers. Wow, I got that out.
Nailed it.
Good deal.
Are you going to be doing? Is SAPFM doing anything?
Yeah. So, last summer I was in charge of the SAPFM mid-year conference, which we had at OSV, and that's where a lot of this started. And Brock was a speaker, and Norm Abram, they were both speakers, and they were talking about the whole initiative. And it was amazing the amount of money that was raised just that night. Mm-hmm. Here you go, or within a week, I think it was like $7,000 or $8,000 was raised just from that, within a week. Which was pretty cool. But we started, Mickey Callahan and I, who worked on the SAPFM member exhibition, which was at the Connecticut Historical Society in 2013. We said, we need to do another member exhibition, and then any way that we can parlay that into raising some money for the cabinet shop, we're going to. So there's a exhibition that'll be happening late 2020, and it'll be right there in the building, right where the clock exhibition is in the main building.
Okay, so this, it's a little over a year away. So we'll absolutely make sure that we remind people when that's happening, and it'll probably be one of those exhibitions where you're going to be able to see unbelievable pieces of furniture.
The quality of the stuff that these guys make and the membership at SAPFM just blows my mind. Some of the stuff is just, a lot of them are, there's amateurs and professionals. It's a good mix in the group. And the skill is just amazing. So, and what we're also going to be doing is some programming where we'll be doing demonstrations at OSV and doing some classes at Connecticut Valley School of Woodworking, in support of it.
Awesome.
So it's something that, and then the school is going to be building the benches. And I was talking to the gentleman who's in charge of the whole project, Bob Romer, and I was talking to him this morning, and he's got 10-foot bench, and we got a 10-foot bench and a 14-foot bench in our future, 12-quarter oak. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Just don't tell Mike where that's stashed.
So,
well, that's pretty cool. So keep us updated on that, and
for sure.
we'll get some information on the web for that. Mike, what fundraising ventures do you want to talk about?
PekovichWoodworks.com.
Buy those Kumiko blocks.
All right, let's answer some questions. Question number 1 is from Joseph. I bought a house in 2017, and instead of moving a lot of tools, I sold most of them and started over with new ones. There are 2 things I haven't yet invested in, a router table and a dado stack. I'm primarily a hand tool guy, but I like to use power tools for dados and grooves and rabbets. Currently, I'm using my table saw with a flat tooth grind blade to nibble away at them, but I've reached my breaking point and I want something faster. I can't imagine. I've used both a dado stack and a router table in the past. Both have some pluses and minuses for me. Setup time being a major minus, but equally annoying for each. I'm also open to other alternatives that don't include joinery planes. Been there, bought the plane, sold the planes. I'm a lefty, and using planes for right-handed people isn't fun for me. So I think the heart of the question is, if you're getting one, which are you getting?
Both. They're not.
That's such a Pekovich answer.
They're not. They do different things.
Whenever I can do a groove or a dado or a rabbet on a table saw, I will, because of the geometry of the blade is going to cut it much more efficiently. Just because the larger diameter of the cutter, the entry and exit is much shallower, so you get a cleaner cut and less tear out. However, for the most part, whenever I have to cut a stopped groove or dado in the middle of a board, I think the router table or handheld router and a jig are better ways to go than trying to do stop cuts on the table saw for the most part.
That's one thing that I wish I had gone back to Joseph and asked, do you have a router?
Yeah.
Because if you have a router, you have a router table.
Yes.
Or if you have a router and a board lying around,
you have a router,
table.
and a vise. You have a router table.
Yeah.
Just clamp it in there.
I've many times taken a 1.5 horsepower router, turned it upside down, put it in a hand screw, and said, "Okay, there you go."
Yeah.
Not for anything big, but little stuff. That's fine. Yeah. But yeah, like Mike said, cutting. Routers aren't really at their best cutting grooves and dados, especially cross grain. And a table saw, a blade, a dado blade, a good dado blade can do an amazing job and get absolutely no tearing. And a good blade should cut a dead flat bottom.
Here's a question for you, Bob, because we've both sort of become enamored with the dadoing capabilities of the box joint blade sets, which they don't have the little knickers on the edges of the blade, so they give you a dead flat bottom. It's a pair of blades. You can normally stack them for a 1/4-inch cut, reverse the stack for a 3/8, or use a single blade for roughly 3/16. I like those. Would you, if you didn't have a dado set or that blade, would you think about starting with one of those instead of the dado set?
Almost.
Right, yeah.
Almost. They don't take the place of it.
Yeah.
And I have found sometimes where there might even be a little bit of burning with the grain. Very small, very small.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a dado. Who cares?
Well, there is that. Yeah. So if it is on the inside, it's not a big deal. It just doesn't feel right. But yeah, I've used that blade, and I actually bought both sizes. I have the one, the 1/4, 3/8, and then the other one, which is 3/16, 5/16. And I put, when they were new, I put them on I put all 4 of them on. Just to.
I don't think that's recommended by the manufacturer.
He's probably fine with it.
Yeah. But I did that at your school, and I said, "Oh, I'm just going to stack them both," and it's just like, "Oh, there's a major step here." And Bob was, "Oh, that's right. I had one set sharpened." It's like, "Oh,
yeah."
Then about 6 months later, I said, "I'm just going to stack them both together." It's like, "Oh, the step is still there."
Yeah,
so,
no. When they were, that's why I said when they were new.
Yes,
I put them together, and I couldn't believe how the surface that I got. I made tenons, so I'm cutting across the grain, and I did it on white oak and walnut, just to see. And it was incredible how sharp the edges were, how flat the surface was. It was just, I have the tenon next to my bench. It's wild. So in some ways I would almost, it's kind of limiting. It's kind of like only owning a 1/4 inch router,
right?
Rather than having one with a 1/2 inch collet.
For rabbits, for like a cabinet back or something like that, don't you? Rabbits and an L-Fence.
I mean, I think okay. So
Dado Blade's going to do better.
Do the Dado Blade and then the box joint blade. I guess you couldn't say it's necessary, but it's pretty cool to have down the road.
Oh, it's. Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible blade. And when I was talking to the president of Forest. I forget his first name, but Forest.
Tree.
Huh?
No, I'm kidding.
And
I was going to say Gump.
And I was asking him, why does this work so well? And I don't really remember him giving me it's because of this or because of that. But he just said, yeah, it does. And, blew my mind.
The magic sauce.
Yeah. And their joinery blades, some of their blades are fantastic. I mean, the Woodworker 2 as a cutoff blade is incredible. I see people trying to rip with it, and that's a mistake.
That's my go-to combo blade.
See,
we had this discussion.
Yeah. I rip exclusively with it.
Yeah. So here's how the conversation went. Bob said, you can't rip with those. It rips really well right at first, but then after a while it starts to burn. And I said, Bob, do you ever clean your blades? He goes, no.
Well, only when I'm teaching in a Woodworking 1 class and I'm teaching them how to clean a blade. So it really,
The side
How
clearance.
often do you clean blades?
Don't ask me. The side clearance on the Forest is like really, really shallow. So if you get any pitch built up at all, it will burn.
Definitely.
I think that's why it gives you a really clean cut, but it's also why if it's not clean, it's not the best blade for ripping.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I recently acquired a Forest Woodworking 2 used. And it definitely needs to be cleaned, and I've been not very impressed with it. And it needs to be sharpened. Like having a used blade and not getting it sharpened immediately, it's just silly. You're a proponent of getting your blade sharpened a lot, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's the only way he cleans his blades.
That's how they get cleaned. Well, the problem is cleaning a blade. I put the stuff on, spray the gunk on, whether it's a blade cleaner or easy off oven cleaner, and I put it on, and then I forget about it, because you're supposed to let it work for 5 or 10 minutes. So 5 or 10 minutes and, 3 hours should be fine. It's completely dried on by then.
That's harder than it was.
Again.
All right, we'll try it over again. So it's I don't do it nearly as often as I should.
I've actually started cleaning my blades more because I'm doing a lot of work in pine, and that pitch builds up where it's like, I got to get that off of there.
But see, I change. I mean, if I'm doing, I use a regular 50-tooth ATBR combination blade. I've been using the ones from
Amana,
which have been overall really good.
Yeah.
The Woodworker 2, as a cutoff blade, I keep the Forest blades hidden so that they are really in good shape for cutoff blades when we need them, because like you're cross-cutting 12-quarter hard maple. Yeah, you want a really good blade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I have rip blades that I put on for ripping, because it takes...
You have dedicated rip blades, which I don't have in my shop, but every time I'm working at the school, it's like, oh, I got to get me one of these things.
Yeah.
They look scary, these giant 24 teeth things, and some of the blades are actually wider than the 1/8 inch too.
Yeah, I have one of them that's 5/32, and man, that blows through 12-quarter maple and mahogany and stuff. It's like, it's incredible how well it works.
Are you running that on a 5 horsepower?
Or
industrial?
3.
3, okay.
3, or I have both, 3 or 5. Yeah. And before I got...
Bob doesn't live in the real world, though. I have both.
Well, no, running a school, it is a little different.
Yeah.
It is a little bit different. But at the same time, the machinery, well, I tried to fit it what a serious amateur or a smaller professional shop would have.
Right. Yeah.
You know, that was the goal. I mean, I have it's mine for the taking. It's a 36-inch Oliver bandsaw. It's in Hartford, and the guy has told me, yep, just come and pick it up.
Where was he?
I'm telling you. And I was like, but it wouldn't, I mean, it would freak out.
Yeah.
Some of the students were, oh my God, you know, and you don't need
Mike.
it. Huh?
Let alone Mike.
Well, there's that too. Yeah. And it doesn't have a foot brake, so he'd never be able to turn the thing off. You know?
All right, so I think we're saying dado stack for Joseph. Dado
stack, router table, router. Later on, finger joint blade, box joint set blade.
Are there any methods? I honestly was just thinking this morning. I was like, I can't think of anything other than a dado blade or a router table for those tasks.
I mean, other than hand tools.
Yeah.
If you're taking hand tools out, then
I mean, you can saw things and use a router plane and blah blah blah. But
but then you're relying on that's hand tool.
Yeah. I mean, a rabbet tenons you can just cut with a regular table saw blade with one wall with a stock flat against the table, and then you flip it up against the fence for the opposite cut, both for tenons and for rabbets and stuff. So you can sort of get by without it if you need to.
But in my mind, you have a table saw, you have a good combination blade, and then you have a good dado blade.
Yeah.
That's the second blade that
I think so. I agree with that.
And I did an article years ago for the magazine, and the
5 blades.
No, this was before that.
Okay.
I mean, remember what it was, but the editor was telling me, oh well, what about you should do that cut with a router. And I was like, I would never do that cut with a router. And it goes, well, what about people that don't have a dado blade? And I said, well, if they have a table saw, they should have a dado blade.
Yeah.
Simple as that. So.
All right. Question number 2 from Nick. I should put some sad, sappy music behind this one. I have a question regarding a long-distance relationship with a beautiful joiner. I'm a member of a local woodworking guild, which has a nice shop that is outfitted with a 16-inch joiner and a few nice planers. Unfortunately, I live a little over 2 hours away, and my home shop and I currently only have a DW 735 and no joiner, so nice planer. I would like to use all of this nice equipment to do everything required to get straight, flat, and square stock to take home and finish my projects. My concern is that by the time I throw it in the back of my pickup truck and drive 2 hours home, would that defeat the purpose? Does wood move that quickly when you're driving 80 or maybe 70 miles an hour?
If it pops out of the truck, it will.
Can I get home and put it in my climate-controlled basement shop before I've warped everything out of flat and square? How would weather affect this?
That's a big part of the article you were just writing as well.
Yeah, it is.
Which is probably out by the time this comes out. So
I would You know, I mean, I would look at that and go, you do the milling that you need to do, and then you band it up, band up the parts, shrink wrap it, and I would put it in a garbage bag, seal it completely. If it's going to be kicking around in the back of a truck, I might put a furniture blanket around it so it doesn't get all banged up, and drive home. And don't hang out, go to the bar or something and, make it into a 5-hour trip. Because, if it gets really hot, then that could be a problem. But 2 hours, I can't imagine that being an issue.
And then keep it wrapped up until you're ready to actually use it.
Yeah. I wouldn't just bring it home and open it up and then let it sit around.
So would you go to the lumberyard, get your stock, let it acclimate to your shop?
Ideally, yes.
Drive 2 hours, mill it, drive 2 hours back.
Mm-hmm. And then I would, I'm amazed at after I've milled stuff, if you've gone to a finish mill process, I typically do 2 millings. I'll do a pre-mill, let it sit for, I'll sticker it and let it sit for a couple days. And it'll be maybe 1/8 of an inch over thickness. And let it sit for a couple days, 3, 4, 5 days if possible. And then finish mill it after that. And when I'm doing my joinery and stuff, as I'm holding those parts, I see people stickering parts all the time that have joinery cut into it. And I was like, I look at it and go, what's the purpose of stickering? And the idea of stickering is to encourage wood movement because you're letting air go all around it. And, where it is an equal amount of air going around it, you're still getting air all around it. Whereas I'll take those finished parts and seal them completely, whether it's a stack where there's no air getting to it, or if it's wide stuff, I'll put it in a garbage bag and seal it completely. And I'm amazed at how stable that makes things. Barry was just over at the school a week or two ago, and we were talking about something, and I pulled out a tabletop that I had made last August. So what's that, 8 months ago? And it was a piece of a single flat sawn piece of cherry, 21 inches wide, and it was dead flat last August. And it's been in a garbage bag ever since. And we put my 24-inch Starrett straight edge on it, and it was bowed or cupped less than a 32nd of an inch.
Here's something that's really important, though. If you've dovetailed a case, don't put some of the parts in a plastic bag and other parts not.
Have you done that?
Not me.
No, but someone here has kicked me so hard, right in the head.
He showed me this dovetail part. He goes, look at this. So he showed me like the pins board was the vertical case side or something. And then here's the top that goes on. With the dovetails lined up on one end, they were off by a heavy 1/16 of an inch on the opposite end. That's how much that one board that was wrapped up failed to...
The width?
Yes.
What I had...
because I'm thinking, it probably cupped or something. You can yank it in and
I had
but no, wow.
I had it was a Chapin desk on frame that we were doing in the school. And I had one in the sides are the pin boards, and then there's a top that's about 10 inches wide, and the tails are on the top, and that goes right down onto it. When I built it, cut all the dovetails, and they fit really, really well. There was no gaps, nothing. It was a really nice fit. And I had it sitting there assembled, but I took the top off and something had happened, and I put it in a bag right around Christmas. Put it in a garbage bag. The rest of the case has been sitting there on this other bench,
just hanging out.
Super dry winter heat, so that thing shrunk up.
And it was about 7 weeks, 8 weeks, and I went to put it together. Big deal. I got to get back to work on this thing. And I went and put it together, and I couldn't believe it. That tailboard had not moved at all, and the pin board was, like Mike said, I could get one tail almost starting. Even that was like way too tight. And by the time 10 inches later, there was a full 1/16 of an inch gap.
So what did you do? Did you just leave it sitting out in the shop until they acclimate?
I wanted you to stick it in your oven or on top of your heater or something to see how quickly you could suck that thing down.
He's like,
because it's not mine.
That's a bad example.
Well,
that's
I thought about.
I'd put it in the oven if you could. It's too long.
Nuke it.
Yeah.
You're serious?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of wood when wood moves. Have you ever done any of those tests? The wood movement tests. It's in Hoadley. It's incredible how much it moves.
That's what we do in our spare time.
Yeah. but the
you've been to our Christmas parties.
But really, I considered, I was thinking about letting the two pieces just hang out together.
Yeah.
And I didn't because I had to get going. So I ended up having to make a new top.
Oh, okay.
Which really sucked. Well,
back
to the question, and you had brought up a really good point, Ben, where you said get the lumber into your own shop, let it acclimate there. So ideally, maybe bust it down to rough parts in your own shop so you can bag it, take it to the shop where you're milling, get that done. That's only going to be there maybe a couple hours, wrap it back up, bring it back to your shop. Yeah, and things should still be pretty acclimated to that. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
When I made our dining room table, I took the tabletop to a wide belt in Gaylordsville, and I was scared to death that it was going to move in that time. I think it was winter time though. So it was like in the old shop, which was super, super dry, taking it out in the pickup truck into their shop. And then I got a flat tire along the way. And I'm just like freaking out. And it was totally fine. It was probably a 2-hour round trip process. And that was a, glued up, 6 foot long by 3 foot wide dining room tabletop. So that was totally fine. I mean, other than the inconvenience, I think Nick should do his milling on the 16-inch joiner because it's sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. All-time favorite techniques of all time for this week. Bob started on the last one. Mike?
I was up at Peter Galbert's a while back. He's a great Windsor chair maker. And he was riving out blanks out of like an oak log to make some spindles out of. And I'd done that like a long time ago. I'd done that sort of thing. And it was always like you look for really, really straight boards. But if you had a board where the grain curved and when you rive, you're basically splitting parts out exactly along the grain. If there was a curve, it was a bad spindle. But Peter, who's this awesome chair maker, he was doing these things and there was this like pile of blanks riven out and a lot of them were like squirrely. It's like, I don't know if Peter knows what he's doing. So, and I asked him, I go, that's like not like,
hey, Peter,
really
you know those aren't going to work, right?
Yeah. So he goes, no, come here. So he took this sort of kind of S-curve blank and he clamped one end in the vise so it was sticking straight up, and then he got out a heat gun for like melting paint, and he was just sort of just heating up the area that was sort of not straight. He'd heat that section up and he would just sort of bend it straight by hand. And it was like, and within just a few minutes, he took this really wonky looking blank and just sort of selectively heating and bending certain areas. He had it like dead straight. And that just like blew me away because on the ribbons, on on the wood that hasn't been kiln dried. Those lignins aren't set yet, and I guess you can do some wacky stuff with it.
Yeah, he's
That's
superhuman.
very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not that I ever really work with ribbon stock or anything, but that was amazing.
This makes me wonder, Mike. Barry and I went to your house last summer and rived an oak, right? And what's going on with that stock?
It's aging.
It's acclimating.
It's acclimating.
Outside your shop?
To the snow sitting on it. Yeah.
Okay. We had fun at least.
Yeah.
What blew me away working with Peter Follansby, we were, obviously everything that he's doing is ribbon, and it never occurred to me there's no grain direction.
No, right.
When it's ribbon, so you can plane either direction because
it's
not an issue.
Right.
I was like, damn, it had never dawned on me.
Well, that that's
makes things a little easier.
Huh?
That would make things easier.
Oh yeah.
I spoiled myself spoon carving because I'd take a stock that's ribbon and then draw knife it and be careful as I'm draw knifing it and keeping all of the following the lines, the grain, and then I bend it on the stove. And so when you've got that bent stock, the grain just goes continuously all the way through that, and there's never any grain change.
Right.
So you're able to carve easily anything you want, because the only time you change grain lines is if you're narrowing a piece.
Right. And you can get really skinny with that stock, and it's still super strong.
Yeah.
It's like a bendy bundle of straws.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Riving is magic.
Yeah.
What do you have?
Well, it's kind of not a. It's basically some of what I'm doing for Fine Woodworking Live.
Oh, good promo.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to do that. Didn't even dawn on me.
We should have mentioned that.
But flush cutting on the table saw is a technique that it kind of makes me laugh every time I do it, because I was like, yeah, that's cool. Because you can.
Is this another L-Fence?
This is an L-Fence, using an L-Fence.
You and your fences.
I'm telling you, what the hell? It works. And it really is it just depends on, what you think of. Because the L-Fence, there's so many different uses for it. We were doing a class a couple of weeks ago, and Mike was like, you should keep a log every time you do something different with it.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I wish I had the brains to do that. But the flush cutting, you can, first of all, create a pattern, any weird shape you want.
Straight sides.
It has to be straight. You're not going to be making curves. But, you could make diamonds or all sorts of weird stuff and make a pattern using a straight edge. You can draw the pattern and then cut it using a straight edge and the L-Fence. And then that becomes your pattern to make 100 more of exactly the same weird shaped things. Mm-hmm. And what's really cool, I was demonstrating this a couple weeks ago, and it was kind of made me giggle, because it was one of those, okay, now you've got that size. Well, if you just change the L-Fence, kick the blade in under the fence a half an inch, now you just made that concentrically bigger.
So it's like putting a bearing on a
or you
router.
can make it concentrically smaller, and it's just like it. Think about we've got this Gerstner tool chest that we're doing as a class, and I did a frame and panel back for it because I didn't feel like making plywood, so I did this frame and panel back, and it's got to fit into an opening, and I was like, okay, well, I made it oversized all different ways. I'm like, okay, well, you're gonna have to joint one edge, and you've got the stiles and rails coming, so you'd actually be jointing the end grain, and that's not fun. So I was like, okay. And then you got to rip the other edge parallel and then cut them square. I was like, or I could just make an MDF pattern exactly the right size and either double stick tape it down or a couple brads sticking out a little bit.
And do it on the inside.
And do it on the inside and you wouldn't see it, and do it in about a minute and a half on the using an L-Fence.
Yeah, for anyone curious as what the L-Fence is, I'll post. You have an article.
I did an article a number of years ago.
There was a video on it as well. Just all of the
Steve Lotta did an article years and years ago also on it.
Okay,
that was probably at least 10 years ago. So
it's pretty amazing, all of the various things you can do with it.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. So the technique Bob was talking about is, so you have an L-Fence, which basically sticks out from your rip fence just over the blade.
Yeah.
And you align it so the edge of the fence is lined up exactly with the outer edge of your table saw blade. So the table saw blade is tucked underneath the fence and flush. And so you have your workpiece. The L-Fence is set slightly higher than the thickness of your workpiece, and your pattern goes on top of that. So the pattern rides on the edge of the L-Fence. The workpiece waist can protrude underneath the L-Fence and get cut off right at the blade.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I'll basically bandsaw, extra stuff so that I'm only cutting a, quarter, half an inch, something like that.
Well, and one cool thing about it is, I'm sure some people are saying, well, I can do the same thing with a router. But
not easily.
Not as easily if you've got grain direction, not as quickly. But if you've got grain direction issues or something like that, you're, flipping the piece over, double-sided bearing, all sorts of stuff. If you've got straight pieces, an L-Fence can flush cut way quicker than any router.
Any weird angle. You've got some weird pyramid shape, piece of cake.
Even straight edges. I was doing a small tabletop, which was about 26 inches wide. And I don't have a crosscut sled that wide. And I didn't want to break out a straight edge in my circ saw because it was just going to leave a rough cut. I stuck the L-Fence on there and made me a big old long push stick. Basically, I screwed a handle onto a piece of MDF, put some sandpaper on the bottom of it. I drew a line on the edge of the tabletop that I wanted to cut. I just put the push stick down, aligned right with that pencil edge, wrote that against the L-Fence, and it was like the perfect cutoff tool for like a big old tabletop.
Wait, so your push stick became the template?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang.
That's, when I call it a straight edge, it's actually, it's like a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch piece of MDF with sandpaper on it, the sticky back sandpaper. And that usually is enough to hold the workpiece. And if not, or if you're doing something weird, you can, either you have a couple tacks sticking out, or you might have it screwed down where there was going to be a mortise anyway, so you could screw it into that, or double-sided tape.
Right.
It's
give yourself one straight edge on a long board that might have sort of a Weenie edge.
Yeah.
I think you covered that. You just actually screw it down on the ends of a long board. Your push stick can be, 6 feet, 7 feet long, and you're able to get a straight cut on one edge of a board. Once that's done, then you can just use a rip fence to rip the opposite edge.
One of the coolest things is being able to cut. Let's say you're doing like a tea table, a tripod table, and the two adjacent surfaces, the bottom of the foot and the top of the leg going into the post have to be 90 degrees to each other. And we did this years ago. Will Neptune and I were doing a class where we were doing this tea table, and it had its snakefoot legs, and we spent hours with the whole class cutting off one end square in exactly the right place so that when we set a different stop, the other end would be in cutting in the right place and square. And it was the better part of an afternoon. We were cutting a whole class worth of pieces. And it was on the last one. It was, I don't remember which one of us, it was like, oh God, we could have used an L-Fence for this. And it would have been done in no time.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, and just because it's a pattern, so it literally a square piece of MDF,
a piece of MDF line around the corner, the square, tack it to it,
tack it into the waist, and you're good to go. And
you get your reference faces.
Okay,
and then you
one better, not MDF. Let's use plastic because then you can see the grain and you can manipulate it so that
you can even use a
grain.
Drafting triangle.
Wasn't thick enough, but yeah, something like that. Yeah, I mean, I use thicker plexiglass, but yeah, and that plexiglass is the pattern. That's what is running against the L-Fence.
That's awesome.
It's just so like, oh God, this could be that easy.
Oh man,
yeah.
Why do I keep going last on these? Because mine... All right, so my all-time favorite technique of all time for this week is when you're sawing tenons or dovetails and you are sawing to the right of the line. You know how you're supposed to peek over your saw, get going, and then just saw blindly.
Sawing to the left of your line?
So yeah, I'm sorry. Sawing to the left of your line. Well, just... put a second line a 1/16 inch away.
Vertically or across the top?
Vertically.
Okay.
And then saw down that line. So like the other day I was sawing tenons and I blue tape on the top like I've been taught. And
that's just wrong.
And so the blue tape is holding my saw in reference, so I'm perpendicular to the piece.
Yes.
And all I had to do was saw straight down the piece.
Yep.
Right? Well, I did a couple where I'm poking my head over, and I kept diving in as I'm going in because I don't have the line, and I don't have the muscle memory to saw perfectly straight every single time. So instead of just peeking my head over every now and then, straightening out my body, hoping I'm sawing straight, I drew a second line on the left side of my saw plate.
Just as a visual guide.
As a visual reference.
Huh.
That I'm able to, instead of just hoping that I wind up square, I'm able to watch it and wind up square. And it's just a matter, I mean, you're drawing your line with a square, so just draw a second line on the other side.
That's cool. I never thought about that. I don't like the peek. I peek over to start.
Yeah.
But then you come back and reset and you never peek over again when you're sawing. So I agree. The peeking is not a good thing. It'll make you saw crooked. I usually look, I can see the blade from below. I see the line below the blade that I'm sawing to with my head to the left.
That's where I'm looking.
But what you're saying is fine.
I mean, yeah, it takes all of the thought out of it. You just wind up, you're sawing to the right of a line.
Yeah.
Regardless now.
Yeah.
And I know in an ideal world, I'd have practiced sawing straight lines for 5 minutes before I got going. I would have, be doing this once a week at least, practice and get the muscle memory and everything. I don't have that. In a perfect
world, just do it.
Yeah. I mean, tell Tom that you just have to. There should be a 10-minute break.
This thing's
in the
not going to get done. I got it. Bob says I got to go saw.
Yeah, I'd love to finish that, but I need my 5-10 minute break. But yeah, I mean, when I'm sawing, you're talking about the doing this and peeking over.
Yeah.
Well, I'm peeking over all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not looking every once in a while. I mean, that's where, you get your arm so it's in the right place to be a pendulum so that, you're cutting really well. But then you're kind of, without moving your arm and shoulders, you kind of extend your neck over. And it's a little weird feeling, but you get used to it, and you're looking all the time. But what you mentioned, Mike, like all my dovetails, when I'm marking out my dovetails, my lines are usually 1.5 inches, 2 inches beyond the cutting gauge line. So I'm looking at those. It's sort of the same thing when you're driving.
That makes sense to me. Yeah.
When you're driving down the road, you are not looking at the end of your car. You're looking 50 yards ahead of your car, hopefully. Hopefully.
That makes sense to me. I feel like I saw straighter if I have that reference that I can see. So I decided, well, I'm just going to start putting that reference there.
Yeah. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
I think in classes, I see students doing things that falls under one of two categories. It's like, and yours falls under the category of, I don't do that. That didn't occur to me. But if that helps you saw straight, no reason not to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's fine. Other things, it's like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, there's a reason why you don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, don't constantly peek on the opposite side of your saw as you're making a cut.
Because you're changing your body mechanics.
Do
and
not do that, unless you're Bob Van Dyke. Because it's like,
I mean, that from Will.
What'll happen is, and it's really, really common for someone to come up with their board that they just sawed all their tails on, and they kind of show it to you, and they say, well, like, some of my lines are really straight and some of them are off. And if you look, the ones where they can see the saw cut when you're cutting to the right, those are perfectly straight. The ones where they're sawing to the left and peeking over, all of those are like slamming at an angle because of that alignment.
For me, it was, I've recently done videos with you. I've done videos with Chris Gochner, and both of you guys are look over, get set, saw down.
Yeah.
And that makes sense to me. And that's what I was trying to do. But without that visual reference, I kept diving into my keeper.
Are you diving consistently the same way? Well, then you're standing too close or too far away.
Yeah.
Because that's what I see is people, if you are consistently going, let's say, to the left, you're standing too close.
But I'm not doing that if I can see the line.
I wonder if you're moving your body without realizing it.
Well, it's distinctly possible.
You might be doing that without realizing, because the whole thing of, to me, what's critical is getting your arm, shoulder, that whole thing positioned correctly so that you can be your arm is an unimpeded pendulum, which means that you have to move your body. When you're cutting a dovetail one side to the other, I've measured my feet move at least 18 inches.
Yeah, because it's basically like a 20-degree difference if you're 10-degree.
That's why when I see people trying to cut dovetails sitting down, it just makes me insane because their body is always in the way.
Al Breed must make your head explode.
Well, the way he cuts with Al, I was with Al this past weekend, and the way he cuts vertically, I have been trying. He started to teach me that last winter, and I'm trying to do it, and he'd come back, and I've tried a number of times. We were talking about it on Sunday, and I was like, I cannot get that technique. It's so frustrating because it's so cool.
So for who, and he's the only person, he makes it work.
Yes.
But he saws holding the saw vertically. So the piece is
pinky,
face down.
Yeah.
He holds the saw vertically with the teeth facing away from him.
Yeah.
And he holds the saw with his pinky.
Pretty much.
And there's got to be a video out there somewhere that I'll link to, but it is crazy, and it's obviously valid because it's Al
awesome.
Friggin' Breed.
Yes.
And we were talking the other day, and he told me, I'm trying to remember, he told me what made him start doing that.
He was working, he was living in an apartment in Boston. The only place that he had to woodwork was in a hallway or something. So he had no workbench. He just had a sawhorse. And he realized that he could just stick the board on top and saw, so he didn't have any vices, and that was the only way of holding the board stationary. So that's how he dovetailed.
Yeah. Well, and he cuts, that's how he cuts tails. I cut pins like a lap dovetail, a half blind dovetail, I do the pins with the board horizontal. Most people do them.
Does, too, yeah.
Does he? Most people. No, this is literally on the bench, horizontal, like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. And so I'm cutting down that way, and it's so much easier than trying to hold it in a vise vertically, because it's really uncomfortable doing that, and sometimes the board is chattering because it's not supported well, and it's just you know. And if I'm doing most of the time, like if I'm doing drawers, I'll overcut the pins in the drawers on the inside, and so that makes it so much easier.
Don't do that.
I can't hang with that.
If you go to any museum,
oh my, yeah, I know.
Go to any museum and get, you know, before they come and arrest you, open a drawer.
Don't do this, people.
And every single 9 out of 10 drawers that were dovetailed in the 18th century and beyond, every one of them. And I'm not talking just, you know, schlocky cabinet makers. I mean, Townsend, Eliphalet Chapin. I mean, you look at the best people, and the sweaters don't mind. And, you know, you open a drawer, no one ever opens the drawer and looks at the inside face of the drawer front.
Mike does.
No, he doesn't. I've pulled it over. I've done it, and he didn't even notice.
He just didn't say anything. He's polite.
And you look at anything, and it's incredible, you know, and it's wild. You know, I mean, there's certain places where, you know, you're not going to have it on a case that, you know, on the inside of a case where you can see it. Yeah, I'm not going to do it there. But on the inside of a drawer or something like that, I would never not do it.
I choose not to do that.
I know you do. And but you also make this, you know, like little baby cutting gauge line that you can barely see.
All right, we're going to take a break and separate these two for a while.
This episode of Shop Talk Live is brought to you by Varathane. From furniture and cabinets to floors and crafts, professionals and DIYers alike have trusted the color and protection of Varathane since 1958. Varathane Wood Stain gives rich, true color in one coat, and Varathane Triple Thick Polyurethane has the durability of 3 coats in one. Visit varathanemasters.com for details.
Question number 3 from Jim. I'm planning to build a sewing table for my wife. The plans call for using cherry plywood for several major panels of the case. While the stability of plywood is certainly an advantage, it is expensive, and I like the idea of using glued up panels made from 4/4 stock. What would you do and why?
If you're working from plans and the plan spec plywood, there's a really good chance that it was designed in a manner that takes advantage of the fact that plywood doesn't move. So I would say if you want to replace a plywood panel, I wouldn't replace it with a 4/4 solid wood panel made up from solid wood. I would replace it with a frame and panel, because a frame and panel is really stable. It lets the panel, you know, the whole idea of a frame and panel glue up, whether it's a door or case panels, that it allows the perimeter to be stable while allowing the majority of the wood, which is the panel, to expand within the frame itself. So I would look at it really close and say, why is this panel plywood? What is it doing for me? And if I do want to replace it, I want to replace it with something that is just as stable, because I think you could really get yourself into trouble. There's a lot of cross-grain construction things going on, and the whole thing would probably just blow up sooner or later.
Yeah, exactly. The strength of, I mean, if you have plywood, depending on how you're making it, like if you have plywood glued into a frame and panel.
Oh, sure.
then that's incredibly strong. I mean, years ago, I made a workbench, and it was out of Woodsmith magazine, and poplar frame and panel and MDF panel that was, or stiles and rails were poplar, and then the frame was, or the panel was the MDF glued in, and it was unbelievably strong and light. But the other thing is, do you have the capability of dealing with plywood, cutting plywood accurately? Because that's different from cutting solid stock. And, you're cutting, all of a sudden you've got this 2 foot wide or 18-inch wide piece of plywood that you have to cut perfectly square and all.
Right.
How are you going to do that? I mean, there's ways, but, unless you...
Well, glued up panel is going to be the same issue.
The glued up panel, if it's floating in a frame...
Well, okay, yeah.
The frame has to be square, but the panel maybe not perfectly.
If we're replacing the plywood panel with a framing panel, that has its own set of challenges. And I don't think Jim's saving any time here.
Yeah.
My main concern is sewing table for my wife.
Well, you're going to cheap out on her?
Well, no.
Yeah, sure. See how that works.
I don't think he's saving much money. Although I guess cherry plywood might be it could be up there.
It's not cheap. I
and
mean,
especially if you're not going to use the whole piece.
Yeah.
But my brother might have spent maybe like 3 or 4 years making a sewing table for his wife. Just make the sewing table for your wife. She doesn't care if it's plywood. She doesn't care if it's 4/4 stock.
Yeah.
Get it done.
Yeah, good point.
I'm going to talk like he's not listening because I think he listens now. Jay, just build that console table. It's a real thing. It's like, just get the project done.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said for a project that's finished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what significant others, be they wives or husbands, that's what they want. They want the project done. And that probably buys you a lot more leeway with buying tools and things like that.
Yes.
So
if you want to stay married,
finish
the stuff that you told them you're going to say. The other thing, and I can tell you this from personal experience, don't buy your wife a dustbuster for Christmas. Because
marriage advice
I'm
from Bob
sure
Van
that's
Dyke.
why she wanted a divorce. There's no
that was
question
definitely the
in
reason.
my mind.
That's man.
So
That one misstep,
had
Bob.
I finished the sewing table and not gotten the
Well, but if it is the Rockler sewing table plan, some of these sewing tables are really complicated.
Where the sewing machine drops down and
folds
out.
It's like a L thing that comes out and everything. I don't think that I would mess with it. I think I would just build it as is. A year from now, you're not going to think about the $120 for the piece of cherry plywood.
Yeah.
You're just going to be happy that it's done. They can be pretty complicated projects.
And when you start changing plans, first of all, any printed plan, you should look at that and go, look at it and squint your eyes, make sure that all makes sense, because I have seen so many plans, cut lists and stuff that are just like, yeah, that's a mistake there, that's a mistake there. But now when you start to screw with the plan, even if it was perfect, and you start replacing this with that and this with that and all, you really... you've got to think about it. And are you thinking as much as the person who drew the plan in the first place? Mm-hmm. There might have been a good reason that one piece was plywood.
Yeah.
And it might not have been a movement issue. It might have been something else.
I personally have no problem with plywood. And I know I'm in the minority, probably even in this room. Like, what is the issue with plywood?
I mean, anytime you veneer a piece of wood, technically that's plywood. So if you're into veneer work or anything, you're basically working with plywood. I choose to work with solid wood.
And you say that with this.
And now he's stretching
indignation.
like, oh.
I'm only doing that because Bob does a lot of veneer work and I don't. That's all. Nothing wrong with plywood. Nothing wrong with MDF. You know, it's a material. If you really think of it, you can say, oh, yeah, a piece of cherry plywood is expensive. But if you break it down to sort of like the board foot price, you're getting like 32 board feet of like perfectly flat, perfect cherry. That's going to cost you a lot of money if you're buying a solid stock and milling everything down to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even at $5 a board foot.
Well, cherry, you're going to pay 8 or 9, and you're probably going to need to start with 50 board feet in order to get down to that pristine 32.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. It doesn't have to be a cherry ply. Just get some nice birch ply.
Yeah. You know, it all has its place, and you know, whether you don't want to use plywood or not, it shouldn't be a, you know, like a moral judgment. It should just be, it depends on what you're doing and it depends on what you're building.
But there are moral judgments.
Well, of course,
we know
of course.
This. Like
in woodworking.
Yes.
Yes. But we're not going to go there.
All my kitchen drawers have birch ply drawer sides.
Uh-huh.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a certain client expectation, I think. Like, for instance, I think if you're making a chest of drawers, I think a plywood back panel is by far the strongest and most rigid way to go because it's going to keep that thing from racking and keep your drawers nice and straight. So a lot of times, like Bob mentioned, sort of the faux plywood panel where you have a plywood panel framed in solid wood, so it looks like a frame and panel. It just so happens that the center part is plywood and is glued to the frame to make it really, really rock solid. So you can get away with it. I would say, you know, they're really, really tight, you know, multi-ply plywood, which is really clean and looks really nice.
Baltic birch. Oh, yeah, it's a beautiful thing to work with.
You know, that sort of, that edge grain with those plies is actually kind of cool, and it can be like a really nice design element. So, you know, it depends what you're doing.
Totally. It totally depends on what you're doing. And, you know, like in veneer work, you know, I know a lot of people think of working with veneer like you're cheaping out.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's one.
Talk to Craig Thibodeau. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the veneer work that you can do, I mean, you could not do a lot of that in solid stock.
Right.
Not even, you know, throw the money aside, it just physically wouldn't work.
Right. Yeah. You're trying to do that on top of something that is moving back and forth. And
it just won't happen. It won't happen. So you are making plywood frequently. You know, it's lumber core plywood. I mean, it's lumber that has the plies on, or the veneer on the face. Yeah.
And James Krenov in one of his books tells you how to make shop-made plywood. So there you go. It's a way to stretch a really nice board or boards from a log as you saw it thin. You face a lot of boards with it, and you're able to get a lot more mileage out of some either really expensive or scarce woods that you don't have a lot of. So a lot of ways to go about it. We like plywood, Ben. I don't know what your problem is.
Yeah, right. All right. All right. Let's 5-star review. And I think I know who this is from. SDBG Guitar Man or whatever, 6681. I think this is my buddy Steve Beers. So take this one with a grain of salt. I used to know when my payday was at work because I liked getting the money. Now I know when they are because it's the same day the podcast comes out. I love the information and tone of this podcast. As someone who lives somewhere without lots of local professionals, it's very helpful to listen to how professionals think through their problems. I also love the interview episodes. Highly recommended. Now just get to them weekly. And if that is Steve, it's just because I used to watch as a kid when we were both in Nashville.
Does that have to get to the podcast weekly or the paychecks weekly?
Ooh.
Yeah, either one would
both.
Be nice.
Yeah.
One actually might be nicer than the other.
One would help lead to the other. Yeah. All right. I would like to recommend sharpening your marking gauge because it is dull. I don't know who you are, but it's dull. Anybody else have recommendations?
Yeah, this is sort of the sensation of multiple Christmases past, a soda stream. Make your own seltzer. Bam! Right. We just got one. I'm making seltzer right and left. And you don't have all the plastic bottles you're throwing away.
Good.
A little squeeze of lime in there. Perfect.
Good to know.
Yeah.
I'm so blown away that I have no recommendation.
I'll get you one.
Get one for the school.
Yeah.
That won't get expensive quick. Yeah. All right, that's all for this episode of Shop Talk Live. If you have questions you'd like us to answer on the show, send them into shoptalkatarn.com. If you're watching on YouTube, please click that thumbs up button. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks for listening.
Nine out of 10 drawers that were dovetailed in the 18th century and beyond, every one of them. 9 out of 10, every one of them